As 2018 begins, the world is faced with many issues that affect everyone on all 7 continents. However, all can agree that education is an issue that determines the future success or failure of the world. For many nations, their full educational potential is not nearly met, and for this reason, this issue is a global problem.
Each day, more than 1 billion children around the world go to school, but schools and the tools they use are becoming more and more disconnected from the students they serve. Educational systems around the world are failing to prepare students to be successful adults. In the US, 2 out of every 3 8th graders reads below proficient level, and a quarter are so far behind that they cannot even read at the basic level. 1/3 of American high school students won't graduate on time or at all. Across the world, 131 million youth lack basic reading and writing skills, and only 56% of secondary school-age children even attend school.
Around the world, education leaders are racing ahead on the ranking list, while in middle-range countries, little is being done to catch up to the leaders, and nations on the low end of the scale can't even establish a base to go off of.
Over the past few years, the United States and other Western countries have seen a trend of teachers quitting their jobs. Among their chief complaints is an overwhelming focus on standardized testing and the feeling that their professional opinions are ignored. Perhaps as a result, the United States was 29th in the most recent rankings of countries by education. So we wanted to know which countries have the best education and what are they doing right. In 2015, the OECD released a report on universal basic skills, including one of the largest global education rankings. A substantial portion of the ranking is based on an international assessment of reading, mathematics, and science literacy, called PISA. Now, since the year 2000, Finland has topped most international education lists, especially based on PISA scores. But this year's ranking places Finland 6th worldwide. And while that's partially the result of declining Finnish test scores, it is much more so because a number of East Asian countries have come to dominate the list. In fact, all top 5 countries are located in and around East Asia: Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. And they're all relatively wealthy nations who share similar views on education. Succeeding in school is culturally stressed as a priority and has an enormous impact on future prospects. This leads to intense competition and subsequently higher overall scores. But in contrast to less effective education systems, these top-ranking countries heavily invest in their teachers. For example, number 1 ranked Singapore is known for providing bonuses to well-performing teachers and attracts qualified instructors with competitive salaries. And as a number of Asian countries continue to see rapid economic growth, having a strong education system is integral to future economic success. Looking at the far end of education rankings, Ghana had the lowest secondary school enrollment rate of countries surveyed, as well as the lowest PISA scores. The OECD has predicted that if Ghana could meet universal basic skill goals, they could see their GDP rise 38 times higher over the lifetime of a child born today. They also point out that when a nation's population is uneducated, it equates to lost economic output and can lead to a permanent economic recession as a result. Additionally, in countries like the UK, 1 in 5 children finish school without a basic level of education. Similarly, in the US, around 2/3 of 9 and 10-year-olds cannot yet read at their grade level. Some point to an emphasis on repetitive rote learning rather than in actual education. This is often the difference between hands-on instruction and standardized test-based goals. The latter has shown to fail both students and teachers. Education is one of the most important criteria for determining the present and future health of a nation.
Countries and students are ranked by their ability in math, science, and language arts by a test known as PISA. PISA stands for the Program for International Student Assessment. And the PISA test is a test that provides international rankings based on one standardized assessment that is taken by 15-year-olds in every country every 3 years. The test is based on skill in math, reading, and science, and is administered through the OECD. So why are some nations so far behind, and so far ahead on the PISA ranking scale? One answer is that many countries and regions have different practices and characteristics that put them ahead and behind educationally. For example, people in Southeast Asia strive for the best education in order to put themselves ahead of the massive population they are in when competing for a job. Today, every country is doing something different to put themselves ahead. For example, in South Korea, they heavily focus on digital classrooms, textbooks, and testing. Then in Denmark and Finland, students work together instead of against each other, fighting for grades. And like many other nations, they refrain from standardized testing. The social impact of education can be seen everywhere in the world, like in culture, social classes, population, and relationships between nations, because better education allows for greater success of society and human advancement. Politically, education determines what kind of leaders the world has going forward, and without a proper education, citizens can be manipulated by private or commercial entities. The economic impact of education is shocking, as a country's GDP and overall success is in direct correlation with its education system. Countries with the top performing schools have the fastest rising economies, and lower ranked countries have a lower ranked economy, meaning that the impact of a country's education system is that it determines the success or failure of their economy. For countries around the world to see major improvement in their scores and future potential, it is crucial to have reform now. In addition to reform with policy, trailing countries should adopt the systems that educational leaders are using within their own classrooms, like a system of teamwork or a system of practical application instead of teaching exclusively theory in the classroom. My opinion is that in order to level the playing field, developed nations need to change their school systems by shaping themselves to the 21st century. Then, for developing nations, I feel that global organization efforts need to provide extreme funding to kickstart their education systems and kickstart their economy. In our own classroom and classrooms just like it across the US, I feel that we should be adapting to the technology we have and use it to our advantage. I also think that we should stop the competition and fight for a better grade than everybody else. If we work together and we are taught to solve real-world problems and not just things like random math questions, I think that we can put ourselves on the same level or maybe even ahead of the current leaders, ensuring the social, political, and economic success of our future. In conclusion, times are changing, and we could see something big happen any day. However, I think countries need to act now, because if not, then they will hurt themselves and their future. Students may be 20% of our population, but they are 100% of our future.